Welcome everyone to another one of my recorded presentations. This time I'm going to be speaking a little bit all about presentations, so helping build a prize-winning presentation and talking a little bit between the difference of a speech and a presentation. So we'll get started. Once again, my name is Kira Axley. I am a 4-H alumni, so just this past year I've aged out of the 4-H program. I competed at provincial communications 3 times in my 4-H career, and just this past spring in 2022, I was the first place presentation, so that was pretty exciting to be able to compete at that level throughout my public speaking career. And because of all this experience that 4-H has given me, I've really become to love public speaking and presenting, and I thought that I'd like to share a little bit with everyone else who might be beginning to delve into their 4-H public speaking career. So let's begin with discussing a little bit about what a presentation is. I'm going to touch a little bit on the difference between a speech and a presentation, and then highlight the 2 types of presentations that you can choose from when developing your 4-H communications project or your 4-H presentation for the year. So to begin, what's the difference between a speech and a presentation? Well, a speech, you're simply conveying your thoughts without visual aids. So it's just you standing up in front of the judges and your cue cards, and you're basically just telling a story, right? You're just speaking, you can use some hand gestures, but you don't have anything else to really help convey your thoughts. Whereas with a presentation, the main gist is you're showing how while telling why. And you're providing information on a specific topic with the use of visual aids. So you might be making cookies and you're going to have all your ingredients on a table so that you can show how you're going to beat in the eggs and sugar, and then how you're going to add in the flour or fold in the flour. So you're really able to use some other visual aids, some other items to really help hit home the information that you're talking about. With a presentation, your visual aids must be referenced. So whether it's physical items sitting on a table, or pictures that you've put on a PowerPoint, or pictures that you've put on a bulletin that's standing up, you must reference them. So they must be involved in your delivery. And those visual aids that you've taken the time to collect, they also must have an importance to your delivery. So if I am baking cookies, all my items on my table, they really need to be important to how I'm going to make my cookies. I don't want a bunch of ingredients sitting on my table that I'm not going to use in my recipe. And I don't really want kind of maybe my best teddy bear sitting on the table too, because it's not really going to have any importance and any it's not going to aid in your presentation any. So just make sure that the visual aids that you're using, you're referencing, and that they're important and they add to your delivery. Now on the next slide, I'm going to touch on a little bit about the 2 different types of presentations that you can choose from. Alright, so now that we kind of know a little bit about the difference between a speech and a presentation, and you've decided that you're going to complete a presentation this year to get your public speaking credits, and you know that you have to have some visual aids and you have to reference them, so you have an idea what how you're gonna pull that off. But I think it's also important to know that there is 2 types of presentations. So the 2 types are demonstrations or illustrated talks. So demonstration, you're simply showing how to do something step by step, like baking your cookies, right? It's a very systematic process. You have to go step by step in order for those cookies to turn out. And if you're doing a demonstration, you're going to be explaining your actions as you do them. You're going to be explaining what you are doing, how you're doing them, and why you're doing them. Okay, so you're going to explain to me why you need to cream your butter, your sugar, and your eggs before you add in the chocolate chips and before you add in the flour. Maybe you're going to explain why it's important to sift your flour as you're sifting it before you mix it into your liquid ingredients of your cookie batter. Okay, so it's really systematic in your demonstration, and you're really explaining everything, and it's really hands-on. So you need to be doing your actions with your visual aids and really going through how you would use those visual aids, etc. Whereas with an illustrated talk, you're more descriptive in your words, and it's more of simply telling how to use the visual aids that you're referring to. So maybe you are going to be giving me a presentation on how to change the oil in your car. So if you're doing that and you choose to do an illustrated talk about that, you might have all your tools. You're going to have your oil filter, you're going to have your oil filter wrench, the socket to kind of pull the drain plug out of your vehicle to drain the oil. So because it's a little bit harder to kind of pull your whole vehicle into the hall or wherever you're doing your presentations, you really have to use your words on how you're gonna use each one of those tools to change your vehicle's oil. All right, so you're just being more descriptive in describing the visual aids or the items that you have in front of you, or the pictures, and how they are important to your presentation, or how you would use them in comparison to actually using them step by step like you would in a demonstration. Now this is just a little reminder, and it's something that I think about all the time when I'm doing presentations. And when I first went to provincials in my public speaking career, it was something that one of the judges said to our group, which really stuck with me, and so I thought I'd share it. So always remember that if the power goes out or your screen gets turned off during your presentation, think about if your audience will still receive the full value of your presentation. So if you're not able to continue with your PowerPoint or use your slideshow, but you keep going along with like the words and the speech that you've kind of prepared to go through your presentation. So if you keep going through all your words, but you're not able to interact with your screen, will your audience still get that full value of your presentation? If they don't, if they're not able to get the full value of your presentation, then you have, in fact, done a good job of incorporating those visual aids that may be on your screen. But I think a lot of time we get caught up with just throwing a few pictures on the slide, and then we're so focused on kind of spitting out this well-prepared speech that we forget to really reference and to include our slideshow that's on the screen to really hit home our presentation. So sometimes that value of that slideshow gets lost. And if our audience can get our full value from our speech without having to look at the slides, then I think we need to go back and reevaluate how we can better incorporate those pictures that we've put up with our screen so that we can really succeed in our presentation and make it a tried and true presentation and not just a speech kind of without the impromptu. So that's just a little quote that I always think about when doing a presentation, and I just like to share it because, again, one of the judges that I think was a real mentor to me said it in one of my presentations, so I thought I'd share it. Now that we kind of know a little bit about the difference between a speech and a presentation, and we've gone through and we know if we're going to do a demonstration or an illustrated talk, I thought I'd talk a little bit about topic selection in order to be successful, because sometimes our topic is really what's going to make this presentation as the most successful. All right, so now when we're choosing a topic to build our presentation around, it's super important that we select a topic that we are interested in. It makes it so much more enjoyable to develop your presentation and also deliver it when you're able to present about something that you have an interest in. Again, you also want to select a topic that you can relate to so that it's a lot easier to speak about it, and that you are also able to really kind of get into your whole presentation. You also want to select a topic that you may already know something about or that you have a strong interest in researching about. So a lot of times with our presentations, we're going to have to do a little bit of research so that we can fully develop it. So it's really important that when we're developing our presentation that we get a topic that we're going to be really successful in pursuing. Some examples of some topics that you might be interested in order to create this prize-winning presentation would be to do a presentation about our 4-H project. Maybe you did a quilting project and you took some pictures every step of the way, and you're going to tell us a little bit about how you went about sewing together that quilt. Maybe you have an interest in a new current event or a social issue in our world that you find really interesting, that you want to research, or that you have done a little bit of research about and that you really want to tell others about. You can also do a presentation on maybe a hobby or a newly learned skill that either you learned through 4-H or that you learned through school or through an extracurricular that you're really passionate about and that you would like to share with others. However, it's really important that when we are selecting a topic, that our topic easily and effectively relates to our goal of our presentation. So in the next coming slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about setting a goal for your presentation, but you always want to make sure that your topic and your goal can easily relate to each other in order to make our presentation really streamlined and really complete so that we don't lose any of our judges or any of our audience in our delivery. So now talking about goals, there's 4 types of goals that a communications project could have or that your presentation could have. They can either be informative, persuasive, motivational, or entertaining. So if you choose for your presentation to be informative and you've done some research about a new study or something, you're going to want to be teaching the audience about that research you've done. So you're either going to be completing a task, if you're going to do a demonstration, or you're going to simply be informing the audience about a certain subject that you've researched. If you choose for your presentation to be more persuasive, you're simply going to be convincing the audience to believe what you believe or to change the audience's thoughts. You really want to make them believe in your opinion that you have developed through your research or through your time in this certain subject. Your presentation could also have the goal of being motivational. So you want to be encouraging the audience to take a stand on your topic and to really join your side. Your presentation could also be entertaining. So if you choose for the goal of your project to be entertaining, you're simply going to do that. You're going to entertain the audience. Maybe you're going to be teaching them a little bit about your new dance move, so you're going to tell them and show them how some of your dances go. Or you might just have a little bit of humor incorporated into your presentation. But whatever you choose, make sure that for a topic, make sure that it can relate to one of these goals so that you can be super successful in hitting home your main idea so that none of your information that you spent a lot of time preparing gets lost because it doesn't hit home with your main goal. Now let's just stop and double check for a minute. When developing your presentation, you always want to keep referring and doubling back to make sure that the topic that you chose fits into your capabilities, your knowledge, and your experience. So when you're choosing a topic, again, I said that you wanted something that you can relate to. It's also super easy to present about something that you might have experience in, okay? You don't want to get involved in a presentation, you start building a presentation that's way above your knowledge or your capability in fully presenting, because then sometimes our main ideas get lost. So it's really important that we don't choose a topic that is too big and broad for our abilities to present. Again, you also want to make sure that you're choosing a topic that can be covered successfully within your allotted time. So you don't want to get caught up choosing a topic that's too big and broad and that won't be able to kind of get from beginning to end within your 6 minutes or whatever your time frame is. If your topic is too big and broad to get completed within your allotted time, then your judges might be left hanging and they won't get the full value of that presentation that you just spent months and months preparing. So always kind of keep these two notes in the back of your mind, that your topic is something that you will easily be able to present on, and that you will easily be able to present on within your allotted time based on your age level. So now that we've kind of discussed a little bit about presentations specifically, and we learned a little bit about choosing a topic, relating it to your goal, and making sure that that topic is going to be successful for you and your experiences, your capabilities, and kind of your age level, I'm going to touch on a little bit about delivery. So how we can use our visual aids effectively and successfully, as well as making sure that we summarize our presentation so that we don't lose any of our judges towards the end. So a key note that I have about delivering your presentation, first off, is that the success of your presentation depends on how effectively you use your visual aids and how appropriate those visual aids are to your presentation. So just like we talked about at the beginning, that when you're doing your presentation, you must reference your visual aids and you must do so effectively and appropriately in order for your delivery to be successful. I also like to kind of point out, and a big thing that I remember when doing a presentation is that what you're showing, so the visual aids that you are showing your audience, is just as important as what is said. So it's always important that what you are saying, you can also kind of tie into what you're showing, so that you're not just saying something that doesn't relate to your visual aids and that your visual aids don't really relate to kind of the words that you're saying, but that they all mesh nicely together. So those are just two key notes that I always like to remember and to touch on when developing a presentation or kind of helping anyone develop your presentation, is that those visual aids are super important to your delivery if used effectively and tied in appropriately to kind of the words that you're saying during your main presentation. So now just to touch on a little bit about visual aids. So what is a visual aid? A visual aid can be something as simple as a poster, some charts showing maybe some statistics if you did some research. Visual aids can be something like your PowerPoint slides. They can be models, so maybe you are doing a presentation about cars or something and you have some model cars on your table, or you could incorporate some pictures, whether it be like that you printed off and you stuck up on a bulletin board, or that you've put on a slideshow. So those are just some examples of visual aids. It's super important that your visual aids complement and support what you are doing, what you are showing, or what you're telling. So like I said on the last slide, Kay, what you're showing is just as important as what you're saying. You need to make sure that your visual aids tie in really well with the words that you are speaking. It's also important that we display our visual aids at the right moment so that we can avoid distracting the audience. So again, like I said, if we're making cookies, we don't want any extra ingredients sitting on our table that we're not going to use in the recipe. And also, if we are going step by step how to make these cookies, and our first step is to kind of beat our eggs and our sugar and our butter together, we want to make sure that while we're explaining that we're going to kind of blend in these three ingredients, we don't hold up the bag of flour and show that off if that's not what we're talking about right at that moment, because then we might kind of distract our audience and they might start thinking, well, why did she hold up the flour if we're talking about creaming our eggs and sugar together? So we always want to make sure that while our visual aids are super important in supporting the details that we've put together in this presentation, we always want to make sure that they're also not going to hindrance our presentation. They're not going to be a distraction to yourself or the audience. Some tips on creating successful visual aids. It's super important that if you have some information posted on like a slideshow or a bulletin board or something, that you have done so in a manner that the visual aid is large and dark enough to be easily seen by the audience. So sometimes at different levels of competition, your judges may be sitting at the front of the audience, but they may also be positioned at the very back of the room. So you always want to make sure that what you are trying to show can easily be seen by everyone throughout the room. You also want to make sure that your visual aids, so maybe you did a poster or kind of any of the slides in your presentation, that they don't give a crowded look, so that again you're not causing that distraction by having your audience or your judges kind of have to really look at everything that's put forward, because that can distract them from what they're saying. And we always want to remember that our words and our visual aids are equally as important, and we want to make sure that they're both being impactful in our delivery. We also want our visual aids to be neat, simple, and easy to use. So again, if we're making cookies, we want our ingredients laid out in a simplistic manner so we can kind of hold them up and we can mention them each in that kind of systematic process without having to kind of ruffle through our whole table display to find the brown sugar or our eggs or anything like that. Again, kind of touching on what we've covered already, our visual aids should only be used where needed so that, again, they don't cause distraction and that they can really be impactful to what we're saying. A good idea when doing a demonstration is that we want to use real when possible. So again, if we're making cookies, bring in those real ingredients, okay? Make those cookies right in front of us. Show us how you're going to measure out your 2 cups of flour. Show us how you're going to crack your egg to cream in with your sugar, anything like that. It's super impactful when you can have real live items sitting in front of you, in front of the judges, rather than just having a picture of an egg posted on a bulletin board that you're going to reference to say that your next step is going to be creaming your eggs in sugar. If you do have images on like a bulletin board or on your slide, make sure that they are labeled. So you always want to label your materials that you are referencing if you can't easily hold them up and if they can't easily be recognized, so that again you take away that distraction, so that your judges can easily recognize what you've motioned to in your presentation, so that they get that full effect of that visual aid, which is helping describe the words and helping hit home the words that you were saying. And again, we want to make sure that our visual aids are arranged in a systematic order, so that everything flows systematically, our presentation is really fluid, and that, again, you're eliminating that amount of distraction when you're trying to ruffle through and find everything, or that the judge's focus is having to jump around from your poster from corner to corner in order to follow along with the steps or kind of the pictures that you are wanting to reference and display in order to help with your delivery. So those are just some kind of key points that I like to reference when incorporating my visual aids, and I hope that it'll help you really solidify how you're going to incorporate those visual aids into your presentation so you can be really successful in your delivery. So here is a presentation or snip of my presentation last year that I won with. So last year I did a presentation on how DNA testing in the cattle industry can be beneficial to the commercial cattlemen. So I went through, and in this slide I'm talking a little bit about collecting hair follicles in order to do DNA testing. So as you can see, I've labeled my two images with figure 1 and figure 2. So you don't have to have, when I say label your images or label your visual aids, you don't have to have a big long description of a label. It can simply be labeled figure A and figure 2, or figure A and figure B. And then within your speech, you can reference them. So for example, when I'm talking about collecting DNA samples with hair follicles, I can say something like the first step in collecting hair follicles for DNA testing is to collect a sample from the tail switch as shown in figure 1. Okay, so then the judge can easily see on my slide, oh yes, figure 1 shows that hair sample from the tail switch. Then I can also say that this sample must also contain the root or follicle, as we can see with the image of figure 1. I can say then the next step in collecting your hair follicle is to place that hair on a hair card, which is then sent to the lab, as we can see here in figure 2. So again, just with my words, I'm referencing the second figure or second image that I have on my page. I'm saying what that image is displaying, and the judge can easily pick out what picture I'm referencing based on that statement. Same with this slide from my presentation. So this is talking about tissue sampling, which is another method of DNA collection. And I have kind of labeled again figure 1 and figure 2. So when I'm discussing this slide, and I'm kind of informing my audiences a little bit about TSU sampling, I can then again say that in order to collect a tissue sample, an applicator, as shown here in figure 2, can collect a tissue punch from the ear, as shown in figure 1, and then sealed in a vial, which preserves it, and which will then be sent to the lab. So just by that kind of statement that I just said, and by having those two images labeled, the judges and the audience will be able to learn, okay, what the applicator is, which is in figure 2, and where that sample will be taken based on figure 1. So you don't have to have a lot of description put into your visual aid labels. It just helps making it simplistic on being able to reference your images and then being able to eliminate much confusion from your images if you're placing them side by side on a screen or something like that. Again, here I have kind of another slide from my presentation. Now, you always want to be referencing your visual aids, like I said earlier. So I have a little bit of information put on my slide on the left-hand side. And then I also have an image which is going to help build off of what I'm going to say based on my bullet points. So when I was presenting this presentation, I went through all the bullet points explaining what SNP testing is, and then I went through and described what the image was showing to build off of the bullet points I just explained. So I would have said something along the lines of, from the image on the right-hand side, we can gain a little bit of knowledge on how SNP testing works. As you can see, in the dotted circle here, that is a snip from both strands of DNA from a base pair, and then you can see how we can either match the two snips from both pieces of DNA to either decide if they're the same or find differences within that DNA. So again, you can use a laser pointer or something like that to help highlight where exactly you're wanting to focus within that image. But it's always important to have another point of reference for the information that you are saying. Now that we've learned a little bit about how to incorporate visual aids into our presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about summaries because, as I'm sure most of you know from writing articles or doing assignments in school, you have to finish what you start. So just like any book that you read, you have an introduction and a conclusion. And with presentations specifically, it's super important that you have a strong summary to really hit home everything that you've just been displaying and talking about. So when we're thinking about how we're going to summarize our presentation, if you have physical items in front of you that you've been incorporating into your presentation, like your cookies, anything like that, or if you were talking about how to build your quilt, you want to always be able to display the final product if you were doing that demonstration on how to do something step by step. If you were doing something a little bit more towards the idea of an informative talk, you want to provide that moment to invite the audience to use the information that you've provided. So you want to, if you did a persuasive goal for your project, you want to take that time to really invite the audience to use that info so that they take a stand with you, or maybe that they change a little bit of the practices that they're currently doing to kind of move towards more of the practices that you were persuading them to follow. At the end of your presentation, you want to identify your sources so that you can really be held accountable to everything that you just presented about and displayed. And super important in presentations specifically, because we, like many know, we don't have to do an impromptu when we're doing a presentation, but in order to kind of have that same idea of kind of speaking on the spot, you have to answer a question after you're done your presentation. So when you are summarizing your presentation, you then have to take that time to ask the judges for a question. The judge is going to then give you a question to answer, and it's super important that you as the presenter repeat the question which was asked to you so that the rest of the audience can hear it. And that's a super important idea to remember, is to always repeat your question that the judge asked, so that it not only helps you kind of solidify what was asked, but it also allows the audience to hear it as well. So those are just 4 kind of key ideas to keep in mind when wrapping up our presentation, so that we can really solidify everything we just said and hit home our main ideas, and not leave any of our judges or audience members hanging after we spent all this time delivering our presentation. And that's the end of my presentation about presentations. I hope that you all learned a little bit more about developing your 4-H presentation and how to successfully incorporate your visual aids and successfully deliver your presentation while using your visual aids, and then successfully summarize it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can find a lot of my contact information through 4-H Alberta, and I hope that my presentation really helped you guys build confidence in delivering your presentation. And like I said, through 4-H, I gained a big passion for public speaking, and I hope that a lot of you will also find that passion through your presenting throughout your 4-H years.